Hey, welcome back to the second channel with Web versus Extended Universe. We are back with the case by case series with Shonen Ouji. You can say hi if you want to.
Hello, everyone.
So, anyways, there's gonna be spoilers for the game and anime for a turnabout for the Steel Samurai case, basically, and Goodbye's turnabout, which is, in my opinion, the Goodbye's turnabout's one of the best mini arcs in the anime because it's kind of weird with Ace Attorney. I feel like each case is kind of an arc, not necessarily like its own thing. It feels very self-contained in some aspects, at least. I don't
Yeah,
know
for
what you
sure. Yeah, no, definitely. Like, if you think of an arc as like it's a self-contained story, like if you just took it and isolated the arc, it could be its own thing. Like, definitely, like each case is just like its own arc, basically.
But anyways, to get people up to pace here, basically, Shonen Ouji, he has no experience in Ace Attorney. He's only getting it from the anime to give a more clear perspective on that. And my perspective is that I played through the original trilogy, and I'm getting my perspective with how the game's knowledge is compared to the anime, and we're also analyzing it legally in a sense. This one's going to be a bit more laid back to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still going to keep it up for the most part. What do you say?
Yeah, right. So I talked a bit more to the legal side in the first episode, just because, like, for anyone who isn't too familiar with it, I wanted to sort of like compare, because obviously you can talk more to the games in that context, but I wanted to sort of like give context to, like, well, this is how it would happen, and the lawyer will do this, and the client will do this, and blah blah blah. But I don't, since I already kind of did that and introduced it. I think anyone who followed that first episode will have the proper context. So I don't think it's as important. So I'll really only like occasionally point stuff out. But there is one thing that we'll get to that I wasn't really a big fan of, and I feel needs to be pointed out.
Yeah, so to explain to people ahead of time, if you have not seen the first podcast, you should do that because that prefaces all the basic knowledge to how the court systems ran this universe compared to an actual Japanese type of court, and as well with how evidence is handled. So we'll probably bring it up when evidence is mentioned, but we're not going to be as analytical because we basically prefaced in the first one that you should know how we're going to take it. So as far as Turnabout Samurai goes, I'll say that I think it's alright. I think it's solid for what it is. It's not my favorite case necessarily, but I do like how it expands the Ace Attorney universe, like introducing this superhero TV show type of character.
Yeah, I thought it was a good improvement from what we had seen so far. Like, it like introduced you to Maya's more like goofy side as a character, especially with like her like fangirling over the Steel Samurai. Let's see what else. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, I say this specific like trial kind of helps you understand her better as a character instead of like more of like an annoying character, which she's introduced as. That's more on fault with how the buildup is mostly.
Right.
But I think this one actually shows her more as a character and actually showing she does have a personality that kind of makes sense for like how old she is, obviously, and like how she is as a character.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
So basically, with this case, it kind of opens up. We have like Phoenix and Mai. They learned that Will Powers, basically the actor who plays the Steel Samurai, he was arrested for murder, basically, and the victim was Jackhammer, who was the guy who played the evil magistrate guy, and how they pinned it on him was that the samurai spear prop was thrust into him, basically. So that's kind of our setup for this.
Before we move on, so who were the defendants before this case that we had? Because so like the first episode was Phoenix Wright's friend. Larry.
And then after that, we had Maya, basically, Maya being put on trial for Maya's murder, basically.
Right. And then, was there somebody else after that, or is it then the Steel Samurai case?
No, it's just those two cases.
Okay, so one thing I wish, and again, this is probably in the games, and that's why they do it in the show. I wish they didn't always make the defendants like seem so innocent, because as like relieving as it is to be like, oh, okay, they're like a good person, like it's like Phoenix is defending a good person. It would be more mysterious and exciting if we were watching the case and like in the back of our head the whole time, just like, did they do it? Because when they're presented like this, where it's more like, well, they didn't do it, but we have to find out why, like who actually did it. And I kind of
bring up that with this case specifically, Will Powers and Jackhammer actually were kind of like close buddies. Basically, they had lunch together by themselves, and basically they were more like related better, like as like friends. Like I wish it showed that more in a sense, because that would have made us understand who like Will Powers was, and he was basically set up. That would have been a bit better, at least.
Okay, that makes sense. But still, to my point, I wish, like, at least so far, they've always made them seem so innocent. Even though, like, not so much with Edgeworth, because there was a lot of, like, different angles to that case. So you're like, well, did he do it? Did he do it and he just doesn't know? But, like,
we'll get to that point, later, though.
Yeah, up until that point, like, it was always just like, oh, well, they definitely didn't do it. So then as you're like watching them investigate and go through discovery, you don't really have that like question in the back of your mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's more just how the game is set up. I will say that I believe it's in the next season, there is a character who, like, you know, the person that we think is innocent. But I think what's interesting is that who the person who committed it's more interesting. So I'm trying not to spoil it, obviously, but there is a time where they make the essentially murderer look like a good guy, and you wouldn't expect him to be it, basically.
The like actual murderer or the defendant?
Yeah, that's how they set it up. So it makes it seem like it could be the defendant because they seem
okay. Yeah,
but that's the closest we kind of get to that.
Right, that makes sense. Okay.
Like, I will say that that's one of the more downsides, at least with the first trilogy. It does seem like that the person who did it seems relatively innocent for the most part, at least from how we view them.
Right, like the defendant always seems innocent, so the focus is always more on like, okay, so how do we prove they're innocent, as opposed to like, well, did they do it?
The thing is, because this is Phoenix, it's kind of hard to frame something that way, at least from my perspective. If I was a showrunner, it's like, you can make them be suspicious, but that's kind of hard for Phoenix to want to prove that they're innocent, potentially.
No, yeah, it is very consistent with the show. It's consistent with this character, and I'm sure it's consistent with like the games and how
the games are structured with that.
But part of me is just like, I wish they were like a little more sinister.
No, I agree. I feel like the thing is, I only know the initial trilogy because that's all I did for this series that we're planning. So that's all the knowledge I know. Gotcha. I do know about the first Edgeworth investigation series, which is really good. I think that one does it a bit better, but
Okay.
I think that's because Edgeworth though is a prosecutor, which is a little different. So
Okay.
he's kind of trying to accuse someone because it's not necessarily a trial. It's like an actual, because it's an investigation. That's what it's called.
Right,
He's
exactly.
just trying to prove it. He's not trying to go to court over it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's for another day.
Right.
So yeah, Phoenix like, yeah, I'll take your case, Mr. Willpower, sir. Kind of like that. And that's where that goes. And I guess they do some investigation things, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I liked, and you talked to it in the last episode
Yeah.
about how you didn't really get to see enough investigating in the last few cases or last couple cases, but in these cases you saw a lot more of it. Like it was very different. And
Yeah, this, I would say the second half of the anime fixes the initial issue I had with the first two cases, because the first one is like, okay, you can kind of make sense because this is basically taking place as a prologue. But the other one with Turnabout Sisters, that one felt like there should have been more investigations at least.
right, yeah.
They kind of brushed it over pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Trying to think what else. Also, this is like a really small side note, but it was interesting how in these cases, like both times, they were the ones who approached the defendant like, hey, I want to represent you, which like is really never the case. Like it's either, especially when it's a defendant who doesn't really have the resources to get the best defense attorney, it's either you're getting someone who is very, very cheap, or the defendant, like if they have a lot of money, they'll go out of their way to request like the more high profile defense attorneys, or because in a lot of jurisdictions it's actually a requirement to do pro bono, so free cases, as part of like a volunteer requirement in your jurisdiction. A lot of the time defense attorneys like have to do it, like they're requested by court because the person literally has no one to defend them. And so the judge would be like, hey, you need to do this. And they're like, well, I guess I'm doing it. So it was interesting to me that in these two cases, both times, they went out of their way when that's usually not what happens. Not inconsistent, not like unrealistic, just like very rare.
Yeah, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So I guess we can go into the trial part since we kind of covered the investigation, at least how we thought about it, at least.
Right.
So what did you think of this trial compared to the previous ones? Like how it was handled?
It wasn't too bad. I didn't really have that much that like stuck out to me. So I will bring up the one thing that I really didn't like.
Yeah,
This will probably be the more like analytical thing that I say, which is at the end of the first day of trial, when Phoenix thinks he's going to lose the case and he has literally nothing to go on, he makes up, or he doesn't make anything up, but he like pulls an argument out of his butt at the last second just so he can extend the trial before the judge can deliver a verdict. And that is like super not what lawyers are supposed to do. The basis of like any argument in court, generally speaking, is don't make it unless you reasonably believe, like you have to make it in good faith. And it was very clear that Phoenix was making in bad faith. He had like nothing to support it. He like was like, there's like a hair of a chance that whatever I just farted out of my mouth could be true, so I'm just going to say it anyway. And it was clear that he only said it to extend the trial and not to actually like posit an argument that he believes to be true. So one, I didn't like it because that's not what an ethical lawyer would do. It's like super not okay. And two, I thought it was kind of inconsistent with his character because he's someone who's supposed to have like a strong sense of justice, and he pretty easily made a bad faith argument just so he wouldn't lose a case, which is like, you're generally supposed to do everything in your power to win for your client, but you're also only supposed to do that to the extent that you can make an argument in good faith. So I just thought it was like kind of weird. Like it made sense for the plot, like why he would do that, but in terms of his character and then just like law in general, I thought it was very like not good.
Yeah, I can understand that perspective. I will say, with how the show's written, I feel like they took dialogue trees from different pathings, basically, like I said earlier. So
Right.
I think that we don't see the most optimal case, because otherwise it would probably be a bit too boring. So what they did throw in is points where Phoenix can mess up, or you as a player can. And they show that type of dialogue text.
Okay, that makes sense.
At least that's my assumption, because I do agree, as far as the show goes, it's pretty bad faith. They could have just worked around it somehow, but they didn't.
Yeah, and like I said, it was just really weird because like he didn't even need to do that. He could have like, I don't know, like just requested an extension on the grounds that he reasonably believes he can get more evidence. And if he was convincing enough, the judge could have done it. Like the idea that like it was a player option and the player like screwed up. Like that makes sense to me. If that's what they're going for, that would make a lot of sense.
At least that's what I think would happen.
I would like to believe so.
Oh, apparently the wiki has a lot of errors we can talk about later as well.
Oh, really?
We
Like
need to
what?
talk about. All right, I'll just read the first one. So,
That's fine.
despite being impaled through the chest by a metal fence post for the image of Hammer's body being found by
Mhm.
staff, it doesn't have any bloodstains on his magistrate costume. Although this can be explained the fact that the costume was post-mortem, it does raise questions why the police didn't notice the hole in the costume was pristine, therefore indicating he wasn't killed while wearing it.
Yeah, what?
Does that make sense?
Does it? So where is this on the wiki?
Oh, I'll send it to you.
Okay. Yeah, I generally take stuff on the wiki.
There's a section for errors if you want to check that out. I think it's more referring to the game, so they might have fixed it in the anime.
Is it talking about the games? Let me see.
Most of it is.
Oh no, it says this page is about the third episode of...
It includes both, though.
Oh, okay.
There's a section for anime differences as well, so you can pick up on that as well.
Errors.
Yeah, scroll down a bit. It should show up as a tab.
Yeah. That's weird. I didn't even notice that. Huh.
Well, I'm saying that there's a chance that could be a game-only thing, potentially.
Yeah, that might make sense.
But the thing is, that does bring the question, with the investigation itself, it's like, if he was stabbed there, the police should have at least noticed that the hole was new.
I mean, to be fair, the police in the Ace Attorney universe aren't exactly the most competent.
I guess that considering who Gumshoe is, yeah, he could have said like, yeah, this is what happened. It makes
Yeah.
sense enough.
I mean, Gumshoe isn't exactly the, shall we say, brightest bulb in the factory.
Yeah.
Trying to think what else that stuck out to me about this case. The director character was very strange.
I agree with that.
Also, the fact that he saw Maya and was like, ugh. Like, I was like, isn't she like 14 or something? How old is she? How old is she supposed to be again?
The director.
The younger sister. That's with the Phoenix.
Oh my, I believe. I think she's still a teenager.
Yeah, meanwhile the director's looking at her like she's like his new waifu, and I was just like, what the like what?
Yeah, Ace Attorney gets weird like that.
Yeah. Which
like I believe in the third game or second game, there's a character that's I believe 16 or something, and Phoenix says like she's marriage material or something like that.
Yeah, that's the culture, I suppose.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's more of a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Okay, I believe she's 17 according to the wiki.
I mean, she's 17. Like, still not great, but I mean, better than like what I thought. She's like 14, but still. But yeah,
she's probably so immature because she basically didn't live around other people.
Yeah, right. That makes sense.
And it's explained later on that she had there's a different sibling that's related, not a sister, but like a cousin, basically.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And I'm sure if you don't grow up around much adults, you might have that type of personality potentially.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But that's all that really stuck out to me about this case. Like I said, I thought it was solid.
I guess we could read over some of the differences in the anime adaptation so you can get some context, see if anything changes.
No, yeah, definitely.
It should be above errors in the wiki, actually.
Okay.
One thing that I thought was notable is that Penny didn't have a speaking role.
Really?
Yeah, because in the game she did.
Huh. This is errors.
Past cultural differences. Personality, I guess, made it more relatable. So I guess that's kind of good. The anime took it out, making it a bit more suspicious.
Yeah.
I think the other notable one is when Cody, like, he wasn't put on the stand.
Yeah, right.
Because that could have changed a few things, in my opinion, as far as the anime goes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a lot of weird choices.
Which is interesting when I kind of wanted to cover it with you, because there's stuff that they changed from the games that kind of make more sense.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. I'm sure it's kind of a hit or miss.
And some are just like dumb details, like for example, when like Vasquez's hood is down during the final testimony, which basically didn't happen in the game.
Right, yeah.
I think what was interesting is when Phoenix pointed out the contradiction, that's when her pipe snapped instead of her just doing it herself in the game.
Right.
It gives Phoenix some weird superpower type of vibes.
Yeah,
It's kind of what the anime does.
Yeah, he does like magically just do things sometimes.
Now, I will say, do you see the point down here where it says instead of proving back Vasquez's motive? That part's really interesting.
So I'll read it. Instead of proving Vasquez's motive, Vasquez is decisively cornered when she claims Hammer was injured. Hammer's plot to kill Vasquez is discussed earlier after Wright reveals the true murder weapon. Huh.
That's something I had an issue with this trial as far as anime goes.
How so?
Like, well, because Phoenix wasn't trying to prove it. Instead, he just switched around and literally basically cornered her for something else, in my opinion.
Yeah, which is generally what you wouldn't do.
Like, I feel like you want to find the motive first, then just try to corner them.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least have it in your head to present to the judge, like, I think this is probably what happened, and this is what they did. Like, that could have kind of made sense-ish.
Yeah, definitely.
And the last notable thing I will say is that at the end of this trial, where basically Hackins, or Cody, basically he joins Wright at the office to watch the new Pink Princess show, and it's kind of funny while Edgeworth is in his office watching it with Gumshoe. It's like they enjoy it as well.
I thought that was really cute.
But yeah, I think that covers this case. It's a lot shorter. We just don't have as much to say on it because it's kind of average for the most part. Like,
yeah.
It's not as notable as the next one we're going to talk about, honestly.
Yeah, honestly, the Samurai one had a lot of potential, but then once, basically from that point that I already brought up that I said I really didn't like, everything after that was like, eh.
And we can talk about a few game errors, which is kind of funny.
Okay.
So down where if you're trying to accuse Nicole's of being the Steel Samurai, basically Edgeworth reminds like Wright or you the player basically that Old Bag already testified that the assistant wasn't present when Powers was injured. However, there is problems with that flashback, so it's quite noble from what's actually said, from her testimony. And secondly, it is possible a player can skip that testimony question entirely, basically, without pressing anything to trigger that statement. So it causes a weird contradiction if you're trying to accuse them.
Yeah, that
like you're told information you don't know if you skip the testimony, basically.
Yeah, that is tricky for sure.
Hey, during the second day of the investigation, Vasquez will still ask for the Steel Samurai script, even if she was already given it, basically, the day of the crime, which is very weird.
Yeah, that is really weird.
So I'm glad that didn't translate into anime. And also, it's funny is that when playing the game, basically, on the third day for your investigation, when it says the trailer door's locked, it's actually not locked. You can still enter it, technically.
See, that's annoying.
And there's just one small error where Maya says the wrong type of steak, which you could just sum it up to her just not remembering it, even if it wasn't accurate.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But the main issue is that it puts Vasquez's name as the speaker instead of her.
Oh, that's awkward.
Yeah. We're not going to go over the typos because it's only game related, basically, but we kind of got our most stuff. There's a few notes that are kind of interesting, I guess.
Okay.
But it's mostly like game related stuff. Like, this is where the pursuit theme is basically used outside the courtroom one point, where Gumshoe basically saves Phoenix and Maya from Vasquez. I don't know if you heard in the anime or not. I don't know if they use the same track for that.
I don't remember, if I'm being honest.
And what's kind of funny is that during Wright's accusation for Oldbag, when he's basically accusing her, like she points out she lacks any motive, and then Wright reminds the court that Powers also lacks a motive. And it's kind of funny, it points out that the defendants in Ace Attorney games frequently lack a motive, which is this one of the instances where they actually bring it up in game, basically, kind of like as a reference, I guess. Because it's kind of like when you brought up, it's like the defendants don't seem like iffy. That's kind of why it's more of like a joke, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like we're self-aware that none of our defendants have a motive. They usually don't.
Yeah, that is a funny little nod to the games.
Because if you look with how the setup is, you have Larry, who basically lost his girlfriend, I believe, in that game. In the first court. Then you have Maya's sister being accused. Someone who would be relatively close to them leading up to the case. And then you have the Steel Samurai case, which, if they mentioned Powers and Hammer's relationship better as friends, and that also would have been funny.
It would have been like, this case makes no sense. This is stupid.
Which the funny thing is they didn't bring that up in the anime, though. Because like we mentioned earlier, they didn't bring up the fact they're that close of friends, really. Which they should have.
The one thing I will bring up is, this is kind of like, it ties into like how it's not super relevant in the games, and so that translates to the show. But and I kind of spoke to it in the first episode, but one of the things I don't like about the show is how like the way they approach evidence, like if they get something, then like it definitely proves something. Whereas like in court, it's like, well, I have this piece of evidence that suggests this one thing probably happened. And if that thing happened, then it makes my argument seem a little more likely. Whereas like in the show, they're like, well, I found this thing, so then that means you definitely did it. Which is not what happens in court. And like, motives are important, but if you can prove that like somebody was at the scene, had the gun that shot that bullet, that killed that person, and if even better, if you can prove that they meant to do it, then like the fact that they don't have a motive isn't super relevant, because you can prove everything else. You just have to prove that like they did it and they meant to do it. So it is like weird how they approach evidence, but again, it's more so the way the games are framed.
Well, it's like how I brought up with the games versus the show, you go through multiple days technically of looking at evidence.
Right, which
investigation section.
Which I kind of like that better now that you bring that up, because that's realistically what happens. Not like with the anime where like they kind of have like a day to investigate, and then they have trial, and then they go investigate again, and then they have trial, and so on and so on.
Well, that is how the games are also structured. So they investigate, go trial. Phoenix asks for an extension because he needs more evidence. And that's basically how it's supposed to go.
Right. Which is how real court happens. Like if you can reasonably prove that you can go get more evidence, and the judge would be like, all right, well, go ahead, but
I
hurry
just
up.
think, like you brought up earlier, Phoenix isn't the best at presenting that to the judge if he needs more
Right.
evidence.
Exactly.
Which in the games is kind of better because you can, like, I believe in the Steel Samurai one, when you trial, like, have Old Bag testify, that's where you get another chance to investigate, essentially, because she brings up, like, an important detail.
Right. Which, how did I forget? The fact that her character name is just Old Bag is hilarious.
But yeah, I guess we're gonna talk about Turnabout Goodbyes here.
Yes, my favorite case so far.
So to set things up, this is a case within another case, so it's gonna be a little bit more tricky here.
This is Caseception.
Yes. So we first start with like a murder that happens on Christmas because someone says like Merry Christmas, but we'll get to that later because it's actually an important detail, which is funny.
Right.
And basically, it's revealed that Edgeworth was the murderer. And that basically makes Phoenix want to basically defend him, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, Edgeworth's like, no, I don't want you to defend me, basically. And Phoenix Wright kind of just goes about anyways, I guess. Which is kind of funny.
Mm.
He's like, you're my friend, I gotta do it for you. Kind of.
I will say this was probably like the case I was most excited about going into, because while the anime at least doesn't have like the most like nuanced plot, one thing that it was doing really, really well was like building up to this history between Phoenix and Edgeworth. So by the time we get to this case and we start seeing this come together, I'm like, oh, sweet, we're finally going to learn, like, why is he always talking about Edgeworth like he's a good guy, even though he's kind of a jerk? And, like, why does Edgeworth seem to be so defensive and, like, vulnerable about this particular case? And there is a lot of, like, good suspense, and ultimately I think it, like, pays off really well.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that what the show really does well at is translating the character from Phoenix and Edgeworth and their dynamics, which is would be really difficult to mess up though, because they have basically a script there.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, because it's still good, you still get that from the anime, basically. It doesn't get screwed up, basically.
Right.
But yeah, I think this gets kind of funny. We have a scene where, like, Larry's in, like, another costume. Well, in a costume, basically, and you have this other character called Laura Hart, who basically found the Loch Ness Monster, kinda.
Mm-hmm. Kinda. She thought she did.
But it's like the monster, like Gordy Lake. Basically, it's not Loch Ness, but same concept.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think we do see Robert Hammond, basically, who's the victim for his case, and well, the guy who died, basically, murder victim, not
Mm-hmm.
other victim. And it's brought up with the DL6 incident, which at the time we don't know what it is, but we do know that is important later on.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. Again, just like more to the idea that like.
Oh yeah, we are introduced it later on in the games. I don't know how the show did it. Basically, Edgeworth basically kind of reveals as much as he knows about the DL6 incident.
Right. Um,
Then
yeah, I like
eventually
how.
he changes his mind. Basically, he says that he did not kill him, and he wants to be defended by that point.
Mhm. Yeah, it was interesting, like how they tied the DL6 case into this, and it like really did um, make the whole case like definitely stand out from the other cases in terms of like interest and like excitement, but also just really mysterious. Because like as soon as I like saw all the stuff with the DL6, I was like, okay, now, well, like now this is getting serious. Like now I'm like really interested, and like it was kind of like the first case where I was like dying to know what happened.
Yeah, I will say, once you reach this point in the series, basically, that's when stuff kind of goes up from here for the most part, in my opinion, at least.
Okay.
I feel like in the beginning they're trying to structure it like the third case is like a good middle ground with as far as investigation goes and as far as how the trials ran, but this makes it a lot better as far as build up goes.
Right.
And also we do see this is where Manfred von Karma comes in, which I talked about in the first podcast, but I didn't want to spoil who he was because he was really important.
Hmm. Yeah, I was like dying to find out who this guy was because he had like a D bag written on him from day one, and then so I will say, I guess I'll save it for the end, but
Yeah.
it was a little obvious how this ended, like how I expected it to end, not like detail for detail, but basically what I expected to happen was exactly what happened. So that's probably my only complaint about this case is it was maybe at the basic level a little too predictable.
Which I can understand that point of view.
Hmm. Oh, one thing that I completely forgot. Uh, Again, points to like the goofier side of Maya, but when she was like doing her training, and she was like, "Oh well, I thought I should train under a waterfall," and like she like tied a hose to the sink, and like the whole time I'm looking at it, I'm just like, couldn't she just have like taken a shower?
Yeah, I think that was kind of funny that they threw that in. She's got a gardening hose essentially and just sprayed herself.
It was like so dumb, and I think it like kind of like spoke to her character. How like she isn't like a dumb character, but she does like dumb things sometimes.
I think it's funny to note that Edgeworth basically was paying for Maya's bail. Like, that's a
Yeah,
small note that was funny because he's like being arrested. He just pays off someone else's bail.
yeah, I thought that was interesting. Which I will say now that we're on the topic, like the whole case makes Edgeworth like such a more interesting character. Like it fleshes him out. It like explains why he's so like uptight about everything, and like why he's so keen on being a prosecutor. And it also does a good job of like explaining in retrospect why he wanted to take the blow for this murder.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people kind of in the Ace Attorney fandom that prefers this character better because I feel like he's written more consistently for the most part.
I would say so because like I brought up earlier, like there are definitely moments where like what and again we're talking about how like sometimes it's like it's supposed to be an example of like the player screwing up, but still like at least in my perspective, there are cases where like what Phoenix Wright doesn't exactly line up with what his character should be doing. Whereas like I feel like everything with Edgeworth makes perfect sense after this case, and it's like all completely consistent.
Oh yeah, for real. Let's see. Basically, what's kind of funny is that uh, when it's discovered what like Gordy is. It's just this thing that was in the water, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I was not expecting that at all, and I thought it was so random, but I thought it was funny that, like, somehow they found a way to make it Larry's fault. I was like, nice.
Well, it's very consistent for his character to mess things up through a series.
Yeah, of course.
Kind
It's
of his
like
gimmick.
it's like the running gag.
But I think what's something funny is with the parrot interviewing scene for the
Oh yeah,
trial.
that one was strange. They're like, wait, what did you just say?
And I think what's interesting is when the parrot says, "Don't forget DL6," and it ties like all of this together to make the story even like better, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And it reveals like this caretaker, like at the boat rental place, was actually related to the DL6 incident.
Mm-hmm. Which was another interesting development, because like I totally did not see it coming until it was like at the end of one of the episodes where the parrot had said, "Don't forget DL6," and I was just like, "Wait, what?" Like all of a sudden, this like random guy who like hasn't been doing anything, all of a sudden he's like an important character. What?
I think the funny part is when Larry remembers when the DJ says, when he's talking about the DJ, it's like, "Hey, it was almost Christmas," and that's when Phoenix uses it as evidence, as a quote, for some reason.
Oh yeah.
I'm not too sure how well that would hold up in court technically.
Yeah, I'm not too sure, to be honest.
Because in reality he's right, because the time was off because of what was explained, but at the same time, would that mean they have to scrap the initial evidence? Because that does happen, though.
So remind me again what happened, because I think I have it out of order in my head.
Because what Larry said during so looking at this again, so basically Larry claimed that he heard a single gunshot, which contradicted Hart saying that there was two. And that's when he reveals, at the time he was like listening to radio, kind of off, not really doing his job, and the DJ said like, "Hey, it was almost Christmas," when for Hart's testimony, I believe she said it was Christmas or something.
Oh right. So,
and they figured that out later when Hart's camera says that took a photo around 11:50 p.m. basically. So it's like 10 minutes before.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a technicality in my opinion.
Yeah, right.
Then again, it's accurate, you know? It's one of those situations.
Well, so generally speaking, when someone is giving testimony, it's not such a big deal if like they believe something to be true, and then you find out that it wasn't exactly true. It's more so important if like you ask them like, "Okay, so do you remember what time it was?" and they say it was midnight, and then you find out that they knew for a fact that it was 11:50. So then all of a sudden, it's not so much about what they said; it's the fact that they knew they were lying when they gave testimony. So then you get into their credibility as a witness, and then you would be able to, as the opposite party, get them disqualified as a witness. But in terms of like whether the evidence could still be used, you could still use the or actually it depends on your strategy, because you could have the evidence stricken if it's irrelevant. But
Which I think in that case, it could be relevant. I guess 'cause it's a literal thing. It's like actual time when something occurs.
right, it all
'Cause that can
depends on the
place-
particulars.
Because, like, let's say, for example, you're testifying, you're doing something at the time of the murder. So if they put in a time like slightly off and you could have been there, that could mess up something.
Mm.
That's how I kind of take it.
In this instance, though, it might not be such a big deal because like it was all generally in the same ballpark. I think more like in the matter of like were there one gun was there one gunshot, was there two? It would be more like, okay, well, we have this one testimony saying there was one, we have this other saying there was two, stuff like that. One doesn't necessarily disqualify the other as long as they both are telling the truth according to their account. Because if they're lying, like if they knew they were lying, then it
I
becomes
guess that is true because
Yeah.
Hart could have just heard one while Larry heard two. So that still
right, exactly. So that's where it gets more complicated because then
Like
the
that
lawyers,
detail is a little different compared to the time issue, which is what I have basically.
right, it essentially comes down to the witness is just giving their account to the best of their recollection because unfortunately it's more often the case that the witness doesn't remember everything like perfectly accurate, so you're just getting the best recollection you can, and then you have to balance that against everyone else's testimony. So then it's up to the lawyers to take all that and say, well, then this is probably the truth based on everything we've heard. But once you get a witness that lies, like you can prove that they knew the fact was something else and they lied about it, then you can start to like strike evidence and say, well, this is irrelevant. The witness should be disqualified to give testimony because they lack credibility. They just lied in court. Blah 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 blah. But it's as long as they're not lying, it's usually fine.
I guess to end off the first day of the trial, basically Phoenix concludes that whoever did it basically stole Hammond's coat and was on the boat with Edgeworth, but he can't prove necessarily who did it, and he claims that the caretaker could have done it.
Right.
But eventually this leads on to basically the flashback moment where I don't know, how do you think of like Wright's childhood and how to explain that trial basically?
Wright's childhood and how he explained it at trial. What did you say?
The class trial they went to, because where Edgeworth basically defended him.
I thought it was interesting. I think it kind of. Hold on. Excuse me.
You're fine.
Again, what I said before, it was interesting. There was a lot of payoff in this because they'd been building up to the history between Phoenix and Edgeworth, so it was nice to like finally learn like what had happened. Obviously, it's like a little corny, like what happened. I will say, excuse me again.
You're fine.
I like finding out like what actually happened because at the end they're like, so who took the lunch money? And Larry is like, so it was $38, right? Or it's 38 yen, right? And they're like, yeah. He was like, yeah, sorry, that was me.
I thought that's kind of funny because it also builds up his relationship with Edgeworth and Phoenix as well at the time, which is funny.
Right.
And it's like, why does Phoenix really like this person as well?
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess there's other stuff he's probably done, but I'm trying not to spoil stuff, I guess.
Right.
And I guess we do get more info on the DL6 incident when Yogi testifies, I believe. That's what his name is.
I think so, yeah.
Would you like to talk about your pains with that?
I'm trying to remember that part specifically.
I believe he panics, basically, when Gregory was attacked, and I think he claimed that Edgeworth shot him on accident.
Crap, I'm trying to remember. Who was Yogi? Was Yogi the caretaker?
Yeah, that's who he was. He revealed himself. Basically, it's like he didn't have amnesia.
Not too much about that part. Just again, I thought it was just like another interesting layer to the case that kind of like complicated things to the point where like, well, maybe this guy did it. Like, why is he like freaking out? Like, why is he like working for the prosecutor? Is he like doing his own thing? Is he like, did he actually do it?
I guess we can talk about with Von Karma trying to put Edgeworth on trial. Would that even hold because of expiration of the case itself?
Yeah, that was
time has passed.
That was one of the things where like I just like totally like was like, nope, it's Ace Attorney. I'm not even gonna think about it. I'm just gonna watch it and enjoy it. But it depends. I know they talked about it in the episodes, but it depends on how the case was resolved. Like,
well, I think it was unresolved because he died or something.
Yeah, right. So it depends. I'm not too sure technically what the law generally is in that kind of instance, but I think because the judge never gave a verdict, it's like you could still go back because at that point, like you can't get an appeal, obviously, for a case that has never received a verdict. So I guess, how long ago did they say it happened? 15 years? Because Edgeworth is 24 when we're watching the trial. So conceivably, yeah, it could have been like 15 years ago. So I mean, if you say the statute of limitations is 20 years, I mean, I guess they could maybe get away with doing that. Although doing it in the middle of a trial for one case, it's definitely not how you would go about doing that. It was admittedly very like weird the way they set it up.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if that could actually happen because, to my knowledge, when I was watching it and play the games, like this can't happen due to literally time. It's like it's already should be expired by this point, technically.
Like I said, a lot of it depends on how the case was technically resolved, and then the statute of limitations. So, like,
yeah, that was the word I was trying to think of.
Yeah, it's a lot of legalese, but the statute of limitations is how long from like the end of the case, basically, until you can't like you can't bring the issue up again in court. But you definitely can't like do it in the middle of another trial.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like I feel like that could have just been a separate case. Instead, it's like judge's like, all right, we're concluding this case right now, but the next case we're doing immediately after is Edgeworth versus Von Karma and Phoenix for some reason.
No, because it's a criminal thing. What you would do is like you would go to the police and you'd be like, "Oh, you know that case that was never resolved 15 years ago? Well, because the statute of limitations hasn't run yet, I just remembered that this thing happened. So bring the case up again."
Well, I
But
mean, all these are technically murder trials. I don't see an issue of Phoenix defending that since he wasn't there.
no, right, no, but
Like, he would
again,
have conflict of interest, but then again, it's another case. They still allowed him to do it.
yeah, and again, like I wasn't thinking too hard about this. I was kind of just like, oh, this isn't how it happened, but I'm just gonna go with it.
Yeah, I know. I'm just kind of like briefly going over it.
Yeah, for sure. I will say one thing that's funny about this case in particular is the lawyers had a very active role, especially Von Karma. Like he really was like trying to run things and like speed things up so that nobody would suspect him and he could just like bury it all under the rug. Which you find out why eventually.
Yeah. But I guess we kind of got over it. I guess we can talk about when they figured out who actually did it, I guess.
Yeah, I will say, so I already said that like it was kind of predictable. Like um my first thought at the beginning of the case was like, oh, Von Karma did it. And he framed everybody else. And then I found out, oh hey, Von Karma did it. But at least they made it interesting like how it was done. Because I wasn't expecting that like Edgeworth caused the first shot and then Von Karma like just happened to be there and was like, "Oh, this is my perfect opportunity." I thought it was going to be more like planned and like premeditated. So I was definitely caught off guard.
Yeah, it was really coincidental. Like, even he said it's like with the earthquake happening, it basically gave him an opportunity to even do it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's basically kind of how it goes. I did find it weird exactly why he pushed Edgeworth the way he did, but I guess he just thought he could win, I guess.
Yeah, it was very like kind of cliche how.
Because by that point he was like innocent, like no one proved that he did it or could, because he had a decent alibi.
Yeah, right, exactly. I guess Von Karma in the end was a little like cliche because like he's the classic like I'm like so above everybody, but in reality like I'm the biggest like D-bag in here. Like very easily falls into that trope.
Yeah, for sure. He's like, yeah, I'm the final boss.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where it went.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's not too much else I want to mention. I guess we do have like that photo thing that happens at the end, and everyone's just like happy he solved it, kind of.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I will say is I wasn't expecting Maya to leave, so that was interesting. And then also the way they send her off is weird because she like tries to say something, but then the door's shut and you don't get to hear what she says. I thought that was really like I get why they're doing it. They're like building suspense, but I was just like, why? Like why can't they just have her say what she's saying?
Oh yeah. There's not too much I'll mention here besides that, really. I will mention some who, for people who are fans of the series so far, actually. there is a fifth case that is not shown in the anime, actually.
Yes. Wait. Not shown in the anime?
Yes, actually.
Oh, so it's in the games, and then they just didn't adapt it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because it was released like way later on, before Ace Attorney's lifespan, basically. So the original cases you see were what I went through, but I didn't see this new case, basically.
Okay.
But this case basically is set 2 months after Term About Goodbyes, basically.
Okay.
And basically Phoenix goes to help solve a case for a friend of one of his mentors, basically.
Oh, okay.
So what I kind of like is that if we do go through the entirety of the anime, there is still other cases that you won't be aware about. So if you ever want to try the games, you have that opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. There is that incentive.
But I think for the most part, it does a decent angle with the mystery element, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There are some obvious points, I feel like, but it's more like how it happened is the more interesting part.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see. I guess we can go over some of the anime changes here if you want to.
Alright.
See, so for first one, after Edgeworth finally asks Phoenix Wright to defend him, there's no earthquake actually in the detention center.
Oh, okay.
I think they put it in the anime for more dramatic effect, and also because there was an earthquake in the DL6 incident, so I kind of like the addition.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Marvin Grossberg is called as a witness in the final trial to testify about details of DL6. I don't know. I guess he could have testified.
Yeah, I'm not too sure.
Like, I don't know. I guess it's fine because he's been in the show. He has some significance and also in the game, so.
Yeah, right.
The next one right here, I think it'll interest you a lot. It's a pretty big paragraph, though. If you wouldn't mind, like, reading through it.
I'm just trying to pull up the page. I'm still on the.
I'll get it to you.
Okay, sweet.
I forgot I didn't send it to you ahead.
That's all good. I wish they would have just like put it on the bottom of the wiki page, but nope. Okay, here we go.
Anyways, for people who are interested about this podcast, I'm going to combine the first and second episode here to cover the first game, basically. At least that arc, I guess. I don't know how to describe it. And we'll see if we make it to season 2 or not, basically, at this point, because we're kind of doing it whenever we want to at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I more enjoy the conversation. That's kind of why we kept it up.
So we're looking at anime changes, right?
Yeah, that's what we're on right now.
Okay. So you want me to read the... Wait, which paragraph do you want me to read?
Skip the second 2 bullet points. I think that third one's going to interest you.
So the way in which...
Yeah.
Okay. The way in which the final piece of evidence is obtained differs a lot from how it was in the game. Wright initially discovers that the bullet from the DL6 incident had gone missing, as Von Karma had left it in the prosecutor's office. In order to stall for time, Edgeworth clutches his chest and pretends to be in pain on the witness stand, forcing the judge to call for a 5. Blah, blah, blah. During that time, they go to the prosecutor's office. Larry pretends to be Edgeworth to buy time.
I wish we saw that. That would have been really funny.
We did see that. We saw Larry dressed as Edgeworth.
This is part of the anime change. Okay, never mind.
Yeah. This is the anime change. This is what happened in the anime.
Yeah, I can brush over some of it.
Okay. After opening the door to the room, Edgeworth goes back. Maya goes in to take the bullet. She gets stunned by like a security guard, but then manages to escape. Edgeworth found an intruder. He claims to have found an intruder in the office. Maya then barges into the courtroom with the final piece of evidence incriminating Von Karma. So, how did it happen in the game?
So they made it a lot more action-packed versus how it was in the game. Basically, I believe how it went down is that you as Phoenix cross-referenced a bullet compared to another one, basically. And that's how you proved it. Because there was one in the elevator that Edgeworth shot, but then there was the one that actually killed Yanni, basically.
So, in the game, both bullets were in the elevator?
Well, Von Karma took one of them. That's why it was in his office. But the other one was already at the police station, which he cross-referenced because Gumshoe had done, basically.
Wait. So, where was the second bullet in the games? Was it still in his shoulder?
No, I believe that one might have been the one. Yeah, that was the one that the police took.
They took it out of his shoulder?
But that's the one the police have. Von Karma took the one out of the elevator, basically. Like the one they got lodged in.
Okay. So basically what happened was in the games, he just finds out about the bullet because he cross-referenced what exactly?
Well, because he had both bullets at that point, because the police station had the one that was lodged in Yanni's shoulder.
Okay.
Because he needed to prove that that bullet
in
particular was shot.
Sorry, I had things mixed up. Gotcha.
No, that's fine.
Because he was taking evidence, right?
Yeah, he was trying to show that Von Karma stole this, which basically changed how the case entirely happened.
So in the games, the police had the bullet.
They had one of them, basically.
Okay, alright. Now I see what...
In this scenario, for some reason, they went to go steal it instead of like how it was set up. It's a little confusing.
No, I see what you mean now. I actually like the way the anime did it better. It definitely makes it more suspenseful.
Well, it's more action-based versus the games make it more analytical type of thing. It's like...
Right.
Phoenix knows like there's a hole in the elevator. It's like, well, that seems like the gun had been shot, so it has to be somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow he narrows it down to Von Karma. I don't know how he takes it, but somehow he did that. I wish the wiki said, because it's been a while since I played it.
Yeah, it's weird that they just say what happened in the anime and they don't say what happened in the games. I find that kind of lazy, to be honest.
Let's see, his breakdown's a little different. We can skip that. Laura Hart not being present at the final trial. That's kind of interesting.
Was she at the final trial in the games?
I think she was.
Again, I kind of like what the anime did, because at least at the end of the first or second trial, when you find out what happened with the monster, it kind of resolved her plot line, because she was like, well, I don't have a reason to be here anymore, bye. So for her to come back doesn't make too much sense.
Oh, I see. It's interesting. It's playing the celebratory group shot was somehow taken. So I think that's why she was there. She took the photo, which makes more sense than the anime, than the games technically.
That makes sense. Yeah,
she's there for that purpose. They gave her something to do at the end.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
A second. My mouse got disconnected somehow. I'm gonna go fix that here
Good
because I need to scroll somehow.
I can just keep going.
Yeah, it's fine.
Phoenix Wright does not show Maya the bullet from the records room during their farewell at the train station. This is because the bullet. Okay, yeah. So that's what we talked about earlier. Wright's monologue, as well as his courtroom reappearance with Edgeworth at the end of this episode, is shown at the very end of the farewell turnabout saga. Okay. The note, which detailed the plan, was never used in trial in the game, while in the anime, the note is one of the first clues.
Which that would have made a bit more sense, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty much it.
Oh, there is more stuff. There's stuff about Heart being unreliable, basically.
Hold up.
Yeah, it's been referring to her taking the photo, basically.
Yeah, her whole thing was very unreliable, to be honest, because she was like, "Oh, I definitely saw it happen." It's like, well, not according to your photos. So all the other stuff is kind of just icing on the cake.
I think the funny thing is how the English script used murder in the games.
Yeah, because so like I talked about earlier, it's not so much important to prove that someone has a motive. It's just important to prove that, like, so in this case, the person had a gun. For murder specifically, because there's different levels of murder. There is manslaughter, which is like you did it, but it was accidental, right? Like either it was in like the heat of the moment, or you guys were fighting and then like you had a gun and you didn't mean to pull the trigger, but you did, something like that. That's manslaughter. Or in a very extreme, it's not even manslaughter. It would not even be murder. It would be what you would call negligence. You weren't, you didn't mean to kill somebody, but you didn't handle your gun properly. You were being unsafe. But to prove murder, you have to prove that the person intended to kill the person and to actually pull the trigger. So to say accidental murder is completely untrue.
Yeah, that was one issue I had with DL6 when they were trying to claim Edgeworth did it. At best, they could have got him on manslaughter potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And also, considering his age, you would have to question whether or not if he knew how to use a gun.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Or if he knew the results of using it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it might be obvious to some people, but I believe he was like 8 years old at the time, so that's a bit more questionable.
Mm.
Especially during the time period.
Yeah, right. Like, he was very little at the time, so I don't think it would be exactly a pro.
But I think that covers all for season 1, basically. So I will say, like, light spoilers. Obviously, Maya does come back to an extent, and there is obviously more stuff to go over lore-wise.
Right.
But that's where I conclude this episode for the podcast. So overall, what do you think of season 1 of the series so far?
I thought it was pretty solid. Unfortunately, I don't think it gets really good until the Goodbyes case, which, as we've made clear, like is literally at the end. So
it's literally the finale, so you have to go through a bit to get there. Even
yeah. So overall, I think it's worth checking out. Not exactly like my favorite anime for a lot of reasons, but I still think it's worth checking out at least once for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of how I pitched it to you. I pitched to you, it's like it's worth at least checking out once.
Hmm.
If you didn't feel like playing the games, and it's like I guess there is an opportunity now if you want to drop from this point onward, but that's
Hmm.
kind of up to you, honestly.
No, at this point, like I kind of want to find out more, just like about the story,
Yeah,
because I
because
feel
the
like.
thing is that the story, in my opinion, you'll reach a point where it will drop off, but by that
Mhm.
point, I guess you could play games like on Twitch or something
Yeah,
and pick
right.
up that way. Because I don't see how else we will continue it after we get to season 3, basically, because that's where the show ended.
Right.
The thing is that there is more stuff to it. It's just that's where the anime happened to end off, which is fine.
Yeah, right. Because they're only going to adapt so much.
But yeah, I will say that what's interesting is what you might think. Like, I'll ask you this: do you think the Steel Samurai case was filler or not?
Um, I'm going to say no.
That is correct, because the Steel
Okay.
Samurai case actually plays an important role later on in the series. Basically, it actually becomes important, despite it in the show feeling like you could technically skip it and just go through the first few cases technically.
I think the only reason why it might feel like filler is just because it's so disconnected from like the main characters.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to throw a curveball at you.
Yeah, right.
Because it does feel like that if you didn't know if there was further context or not. Because you could have said yes, and you could explain it didn't feel kind of like how everything else was going on.
Right.
Which is accurate. It's not connected to our character, it's more of like the first normal case that Phoenix takes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That's not related to anything else. But as far as the future of this podcast, for people wondering, we're basically going to try to do basically the 2 cases at a time system. So that way we have enough to talk about. And I think with our first episode, if you've seen it, we basically prefaced most of the legal jargon you'll need. But yeah, this is where this series is going to be concluding for now. But we'll see how season 2 goes, actually.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it's been Drew from Web Universe with Shonen Ouji. Be sure to check out his channel for Dr. Stone content, One Piece, whatever else he covers. I don't know. I can't predict the future. I only see the present, basically. And oh yeah, we are doing a collab, so check out my main channel at some point. That'll be coming out soon. I recently recorded my stuff for it not too long ago. So still need to edit the audio, but as far as editing goes, that won't take too long, hopefully, here. And yeah, that's where we're at. But anyways, I will see you all in the next podcast. So see ya.